And so to just dive right into it, recently, a Pasco County man was killed and dismembered during a delivery driving situation. Brutal murder, terrible thing that happened. So, what role does the delivery service play in all of this, and where does the liability really fall?
Yeah, so you have basically a two-sided issue when it comes to delivery services and drivers, right? You have the risk associated with the corporation itself and its employees who are entering dangerous scenarios and could be attacked by a customer. And then you have the risk associated with the customer being exposed to a potential danger in the form of um, a worker who may or may not have the training or the knowledge or the background to handle the job and could potentially be looking for an easy target inside somebody's home. So I can address that in those two ways. I think one of the first things that's important is to understand when you're talking about a delivery driver, um, there are some substantial differences with respect to the risks associated with an employee of a company as opposed to an independent contractor. The best way I could, the best example I would have would be like Domino's, I believe, is employs their drivers. So they show up to your house, they deliver the pizza. If they don't perform their job, they potentially lose their job, they get fired. There are presumably background checks, there's supervisors, there's corporate responsibility. To me, that's a better structure than a situation where somebody's an independent contractor and isn't beholden to anything for a company that could terminate their employment relationship. For example, if you're working for Uber and you're an Uber Eats delivery driver, the background checks may be very different for that. You don't have a direct supervisor. You, if you lose your job because you attacked somebody, you can just go find another one. It's not going to show up the same way that it would in terms of losing your job with a corporate employer because you're not beholden to them. You're not dealing with the same training and policies compliance that you would have at a physical company where you show up and people see your face. They know what you look like. So I think first and foremost, understanding that dynamic is really important. Um, I think if you take it a step further, these delivery drivers need to be aware in terms of protecting themselves of the neighborhoods that they're going into and the times that they're making these deliveries. I think they need to be trained on how to look out for their surroundings. Um, and I don't think that companies have the right protocol in place because they usually prioritize making profits over protecting employees or independent contractors. So obviously there's going to be more risks with making a delivery at 2 in the morning than there is at 5 in the afternoon in a gated community. So those are things that I think drivers really need to be aware of. That's why there's a lot of discussion about drivers operating, with protection, with weapons or some mechanism for defending themselves, which of course opens the situation up to a danger to the customer. So those are really, to me, significant factors. But there is a complete failure in the industry now to protect these drivers and to protect the customers from the drivers if those drivers haven't been vetted carefully.
So, what are some things that you think that these delivery companies can do to help protect their drivers? And if a driver was in a situation where they did get hurt, what evidence do you think they should collect to build their case?
You're talking about the drivers being injured or attacked in this situation,
Yes.
right? So I think one thing that would be really helpful is having cameras. Obviously police officers operate with body cams. I think if there's some mechanism for detection, an inexpensive camera, whether vehicles were equipped with that, I think that provides a deterrent for committing a crime. Not always, but I think people think twice. Maybe these people have cameras, or at least it's advertised that they do. I'm going to think twice before um, I decide to commit some kind of criminal act. I think having check-ins where um, where supervisors are in direct communication with the driver saying what's going on at this time, what's going on at this time, And advertising to your customers that that's what's going on is really important. Knowing that the drivers comply with policies and procedures and that they're trained and there's people looking over their shoulder, to me, and I think to most people, would serve as a deterrent for committing a crime. And I don't think those things are done. In fact, I know they're not, because we're having this discussion now, and you're saying what kind of things can be done to protect these drivers. If this was already being done, we would already have a partial answer to that question.
So what do you think will drive these delivery companies to actually enact these policies? Do you think it's litigation? Do you think it'll be like societal pressure?
Yeah. I want to give you a warmer answer to that question than I'm going to. I want to tell you that these companies that employ drivers, either as employees or agents, will have some sort of unified epiphany to do the right thing. But the reality is that they won't. The thing that will incentivize these companies to do the right thing, there's basically two things: formal legislation and the loss of profits, right? So unfortunately, right now, with the legislature the way it is, what's being done is that insurance companies are being protected first, which has flown in the face of claims that our state and local government is actually protecting society. What I mean by that is property management companies are getting off the hook. Defendants are allowed to blame the assailants for committing a crime as opposed to taking responsibility for not deterring the crime. It's like if you invite people into the water and you know there's a shark in there, you don't get to blame the shark for biting somebody. You got to take responsibility if you know that there's a danger in the water to prevent somebody from going in. So I think ultimately, getting back to your original question, what is going to make that change is money. I think when people realize that they're really in danger and they don't want to take that job, and the wages go up because you can't find somebody to fill that position, I think that's going to make a change. I think with litigation, which is not going to stop because these companies are so dangerous and these positions are so dangerous, I think that will deliver a message to companies that they really need to put measures in place to protect their drivers. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because people become customers and people become employees by knowing that they're going to be protected. So it's not necessarily for the right reasons, but I think one way or another, companies may very well recognize what they need to do because it's more profitable at some point to do the right thing. I just don't think that point is today. I don't think we've gotten to that juncture, but I think we're headed there.
All right. And the $3 million settlement for the Uber Eats driver who got shot and carjacked, what do you think that means for future cases involving like third-party delivery companies?
Yeah. So every case is different. So I can't generalize that individual recovery with how another case may be treated. With that said, I do think that the public is recognizing that corporate America is not out for their best interests. And I think that these corporations are beginning to recognize that in order to get the business that they want to get, that they're going to have to start protecting people. And I think a lot of these settlements that are occurring right now are by virtue of a combination of that, what I just said, and also for purposes of their public image, PR and publicity, by settling a case for maybe a little more than they want to spend. As a corporation, you avoid the publicity of a trial. You avoid what a lot of defendants are calling runaway verdicts, or nuclear verdicts, where a jury that's angry will say, you know what, I can't find a job these days. We're going through a recession. Inflation's out of control. This person's had a tough time. I'm going to give them a 10, 20, $30 million verdict when pre-pandemic, maybe the way of thinking didn't align with that. So I think some of these types of exposure to nuclear verdicts and to a bad PR image are jointly driving that kind of decision making in terms of settling cases.
All right. And also recently, WMNF covered a few protests that were happening around cities in Florida of delivery drivers and Uber drivers demanding better pay, demanding the right to unionize and things like that. Do you think having a union and having these drivers in a union will increase protection for them?
You know, without knowing all of the internal protocols and procedures that Uber employs on a day-to-day basis, because they're obviously an adapting company. And your question is sort of a hybrid of an employment-based question and a security question in the context of personal injury litigation. I tend to believe that unionizing generally protects employees where they're difficult to replace. In situations where a union gets together and said, look, we're all going to go on strike. We're not going to work. You need to protect us. You need to pay us better or we're going to leave. The leverage is if we leave, you know, what is the company going to do? Are they in trouble? Are they going to be able to replace these people? If the answer is yes, they can replace us right away, then I think unionizing has limited leverage. So that's sort of my subjective formulaic answer to that question. But I think it needs to be taken case by case and company by company because everybody's got different policies. In certain geographic regions, unionizing may be more beneficial because finding a replacement may be much more difficult in perhaps Tampa than it would be in Miami, or a town outside of Tampa than it would be in Fort Lauderdale. So there's sort of a moving target with respect to that. But I don't love unionizing as a concept where there's no leverage or limited leverage to place on the employer.
All right. And just in summary and in conclusion, what needs to happen next to make sure that delivery drivers are safe and protected and all gig economy workers as the gig economy gets bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more corporate accountability, training, and supervision. And that's the bottom line. I think companies need to put in place policies so that they know to train their drivers and their employees to protect themselves, to be wary of certain neighborhoods, to report in, to encourage surveillance technology. We encourage that today inside of stores and banks to protect property, but we don't encourage it to protect the public, which to me has a lot more valuable than tangible things. So that needs to happen. And I think it's kind of anachronistic in this world and behind the times that in this gig economy, as you say, where everything is Amazon and Uber Eats, that we're still holding a higher value on property than we are on people. And it's a sad reality and something needs to change.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, Aaron.
Sure. It's my pleasure.
All right.